I was around 3 years old when Morris and Maisel became a part of our Jones Chapel family. And I think because of the close ties with Aunt Thela keeping Robin and Maisel's close friendship with Jane and Ree, it took almost till I was in the second grade before I realized that the Andrews were not actually biologically Sartons. To all of you who can and do claim kinship with Morris, and to all of us who do and claim friendship with Morris, we were truly blessed. If one could look in the dictionary to find a definition of Morris Andrews, one would find words like dignity, servanthood, wisdom, humility with strength, faithfulness, integrity, patriotism, and compassion. Morris was a quiet, gentle giant whose presence made a difference in so many lives. You are here today because of how he touched your life. Everyone loved Morris and was honored to call him family and friend. Morris had a great sense of humor. He was a sharp dresser, a gentleman, very business savvy, and such a good sport. He kept the cleanest car of any person I've ever known in my life. And he could pray the sweetest prayers. Morris Andrews loved his Lord and served him faithfully. He set the bar high for all of us. As I was thinking of a scripture that exemplified Morris's life, I found it in Colossians. I'd like to share with you now Colossians 3:12 through 17. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has any complaint against another, forgive each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so that you must also forgive. Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ, indeed, you were called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom. And with gratitude in your hearts, sing songs to the Lord. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. A life well lived. Growing up, Morris spent a lot of his time with his mother's parents, the Hansfords. He was the oldest grandchild, and as he liked to say, the favorite grandchild. During the summer, he worked hard on the farm, doing whatever needed to be done. He also spent a lot of time helping his grandmother to make sure that all that harvest got canned and preserved for the coming winter. Morris's love for growing things followed him all of his life. He loved his rose bushes and was very proud of his garden. He and Max Sarton used to have a contest whose tomato would get ripe first. However, even more important than that, the strong work ethics, was the lessons he learned every night as his grandparents would read the Bible out loud, and then all three of them would kneel and pray together. This laid the foundation for a man who would love and serve God throughout his life. Morris never had to speak his faith out loud. He lived it every day. Morris loved his family. One of my favorite stories is how he headed to Dixie Dale one day to get a grilled cheese and ended up with a future bride. People say that opposites attract, and if you had the joy of witnessing the 62 years of Maisel and Morris's married life, you know that that's true. Morris, the quiet, gentle, behind-the-scenes man, and Maisel, the lively mover and shaker. Maisel had two speeds, wide open and sleep. Morris was a man far ahead of his time. Where most men of that era expected the little wife to stay home, raise the family, cook and clean, not Morris. He was an advocate for women's rights even way back then. Morris, who knew and loved his Maisel, was her biggest supporter, encourager, and cheerleader. He allowed and enabled her to be the woman God created her to be. While Maisel was attending choir practice, women's groups, school meetings, and so forth, Morris made sure that Robin and Dean were well taken care of. And between Morris, Maisel, Aunt Vila, or Nanny, and Zadie, they did just fine. Robin shared how her dad was always the first one up every morning and how he would fix Maisel's coffee and bring it to her. Then he would cook breakfast for all of them, and we're not talking about cereal. One of my special memories of this marriage came during a revival service. It was actually a service about marriage and commitment. During the service, the preacher had talked about marriage and how you need to be committed. And then he looked out in the audience and he said, I can pretty much tell how long a couple has been married by how close they sit to one another. What I remember most about that night was right after he made the statement, we all heard a commotion, and we turned and looked as Maisel jumped up and sat in Morris's lap. Right over there. Morris turned beet red, but then he wrapped his arms around Maisel and smiled that shy, sweet smile. Morris loved his children, and he was always ready to share his pride and joy in them. Robin was a quiet, shy, sweet little girl who had her daddy wrapped around her finger. Morris shared with our Sunday school class how that when it came time to buy Robin a new winter coat, the three of them went shopping. Robin saw and fell in love with a beautiful little coat with a fur collar. Maisel, being the practical one, found another little coat that would not be near as hard to clean and would last for several winters. I imagine there were a few tears that day, Robin. Morris said the next day, when he came home, he noticed Robin's little new coat that she was supposed to be wearing to school lying on a chair. She did not want to wear that coat to school. Well, needless to say, Morris bagged up that little coat, returned to the store, and exchanged it for a little wool tan coat with a black and brown beaver fur. A daddy's love. Dean was not exactly a quiet, shy little boy. Sorry, Dean. But you earned the reputation of being a live wire. I wonder where you got that. During Sunday night service, when your mom was playing the piano, your dad was walking up and down that aisle, sometimes running up and down that aisle, chasing you. It was during those years that Morris Andrews and T.J. Berriman formed an unbreakable friendship. See, they would tag team taking care of Dean. Max Sarton once said that he had to later apologize for all the teasing he put Morris through, and that he even had to eat crow when his son Jonathan came along. Well, Dean, you did outgrow that stage of your life, and you grew into a fine young man that your daddy was so proud of. Everyone always knew how much your dad loved NASCAR and a fast car, and it meant so much to him that you shared that love with him. Just think, if Morris had not wanted that grilled cheese that day, Royston might have had their own Bill Elliott. But I'm glad he was hungry. Morris loved all his family. Burke and Connie, you were very special to him. He was so proud of all of you and all of your accomplishments. I loved keeping up with all of you through Maisel and Morris. There were others that Morris also loved dearly. During the last years of Maisel's life, as well as Morris's declining health, he was so blessed to have Miss Sharon and Keisha and Tasha. who helped to take care of them. You enabled Mr. Morris and Maisel to stay in the home that they loved so much. And he was so appreciative to both of you. He considered you part of his family. Morris loved his country. Few people knew that Morris was blind in one eye, but that did not stop him from enlisting to serve his country. When Morris signed up to serve, his grandparents were very distraught and worried. They had lived through World War II. But he promised that he would write to them every day to let them know he was okay. Morris fought in the Korean War, earning the position of staff sergeant. Morris shared how he had been in a foxhole and things had been pretty quiet. He got up to go get a pencil so that he could write to those grandparents. And on his way back, Morris witnessed the foxhole that he had just gotten out of being blown up. He lost his buddy who had been there with him. God's hand was on Morris that day. And I know that all of the prayers that had been lifted up for him were answered. Morris lived the remainder of his life serving that God and making a positive impact on so many lives. He never forgot the cost of freedom. He was proud to be an American, and he was proud to be a veteran. Morris loved his church and his church family. For years, he served as our Sunday school superintendent. He would open every Sunday with a prayer. We would sing a hymn, and then we would recognize birthdays. We even got to come up and put money in a little bitty church bank. One of his jobs was also to make sure that every Sunday night, and every Wednesday night, that all the lights were turned off, the commodes flushed, the temperature set, and the church locked up. Morris had to have had the patience of Job. While he waited for all the folks, especially the ladies, to finish talking and telling each other goodbye, where he could finally lock up and go home. He also served as chairman of the administrative board and was a very active part in all the renovations of our church, as well as the building of our parsonage and our Family Life Center. These are just a few examples of the commitment and care Morris had for others and his witness wherever he went. His hometown, workplace, community, and church. Morris had a small finance business in Royston, which he later relocated in Livonia. One year, when the entire country was in a major economic crisis, Morris came home from work. Maisel noticed a large bump or callus on his finger, and when questioned, he told her that for the last 2 days, he had handwritten over 125 loans for the people in Royston. Money was tight, and Morris wanted the families to be able to have a decent Christmas for their children. When Morris retired from Livonia, there was still some of his longtime customers who would come to the house, knock on the door, and ask for a loan. He never failed to help people. And because of who he was, he said he always got repaid, even if sometimes it took a little while. Morris's generosity went way beyond his business. One of the Jones Chapel ladies shared with me that when her grandson was in college, and unbeknownst to anyone, Morris would send a note of encouragement and also include some folded up bills in the note. The young man later shared this with his grandmother. He said the money came in handy, but what he appreciated the most was that Mr. Morris thought of him and took the time and effort to let him know. There is no telling how many people Morris Andrews reached out to and inspired through his love and generosity. Morris Andrews, a man who loved the Braves and Georgia Bulldogs. He loved NASCAR and a fast car. He loved his lunch meals from Deals, Harley, his dog, and a stray black cat. I was over there one time. I had been visiting, and we walked outside, and there was the most beautiful black cat. And I said, "Oh, y'all got a new cat?" And they still said, "No, it's our neighbors. I've taken him home twice, and I've called them." but he just wants to live at our house, I think. When Morris walked me to the car, I leaned over and I said, Morris, you're not by any chance feeding that cat, are you? And he said, Morris loved the men's club fishing trips. He loved cherry cobbler. He loved his garden. He loved serving in the Lions Club, and he loved church gatherings. And he even loved playing games in the spares and payers. Morris Andrews loved his Lord, his family, his friends, and his country. And Morris Andrews was loved by everyone who had the joy of knowing him. Our preacher opened the service with some words that a good friend of Robin's, Tim Rivas, had written about Morris. And I would like to close the service because I think it speaks of who Morris was. I quote, "The dignity and self-discipline with which men like Mr. Andrews live their lives, it is so enviable. They were a breed apart. I'm not sure they exist anymore. The loss is keen." Thank you, Morris, for a life well lived. We love you.